Assalamu alaikum, dear viewers, and welcome to another episode of TMJ's Political Current. I'm your host, Fatima El-Zein, and today we're speaking with Kevork Almassian, an award-winning journalist, geopolitical analyst, and the host of independent political commentary channel Syriana Analysis. Today he joins me in dissecting the latest in Syria with the heightening of sectarian killings against minorities and how the Western world is responding as Jolani takes the reins of a nation in political turmoil. Thank you, Kevork, for joining me for this discussion. There's so much to unpack with all the chaos that's been taking over Syria and the rest of the region. I'm going to get right into it. We have been seeing a lot of mass executions and killings of minorities, including infants and children in Syria by HTS militants. Um, how do those videos make you feel when you first saw them?
Actually, I anticipated this type of, let's say, hostilities and atrocities
Mm,
against especially the Alawites. I have been following the so-called Syrian revolution from the early days when I was only 21 years old, but I had an obsession with downloading and archiving videos from the so-called peaceful protests of
mm,
the anti-Assad, let's say, protesters. And they were very clear from the beginning. They were saying the Alawites to the graves and the Christians to Beirut.
mm,
العلوية المسيحية إلى بيروت والعلوية إلى التابوت. This was the slogan from day one. Therefore, I wasn't really surprised that they are committing these type of crimes. But personally, when I see an innocent person getting killed for being born in the wrong religion, this gives me a goosebump because this could be myself.
mm,
If I was today in Syria, or let's say let's go one step further and say if the German government succeeded in deporting me from Germany, which they were actively trying to do it in the past years, after lobbying from the Muslim Brotherhood or organizations and lawyers here in Germany, they were one step away from deporting me to Syria. So I could have ended up in one of these footage. So I put myself always in the shoes of these innocent people who got killed.
yeah.
But this is not something new. Like it has been going on for centuries. And that is why many of the minorities in the region, and I'm not here blaming the Sunnis, I will come to that later.
Mhm,
They were forced to go to the mountains, like the
mm,
Maronites, like the Shias, like the Druze and the Alawites, exactly because there was this type of persecution against them. This was religious based or sectarian based or ethnic based. Now, what happened is, unfortunately, centuries after the death of Prophet Muhammad, there have been some theorists who came and tried to explain again what was the message. But the message was
mm,
clear from Prophet Muhammad, and everybody understood it at that time. But some people, for example, Ibn Taymiyyah and others, they have distorted many of these teachings and they have legalized the persecution against the heretics. So, who
mm,
defines who is a heretic and who is not? It is up to interpretation. And nowadays, since we have the money in the hands of Qatar, Saudi Arabia, they are
mhm,
capable of shaping this type of interpretations because they're the ones who are funneling billions of dollars into radicalizing basically our youth. Those are our
yeah.
youth.
They're
Like these
shaping their
people,
worldview. Mhm,
those are our youth. Those were my friends in the university. Those were my colleagues
mhm,
in the school. We studied together. But then all of a sudden there was like a switch and they started seeing me as an infidel and they started seeing me as an
mhm,
Armenian refugee that has to go back to Armenia. But why I ended up in Syria from the first place? It was the same and similar persecution 110 years ago by the Ottoman Empire against the Armenians. And we fled to Syria, and
mm,
those who protected us were the grandparents of the current generation in Syria. So everybody knows these stories, right? So this is let's say, a common knowledge among the Syrian people. But what is not common is to repeat the same mistakes without learning from the lessons of history. That's the tragedy.
mm, mm. Do you think that we're going to see these minority groups stand up, um, and stand their ground?
So I'm going to be blatantly honest with you, and
Mm,
this could upset many people, but this is the truth because I'm
yeah.
talking to countless of friends and some relatives in Syria, wherever is left, and nobody has the power and the mental capacity, let's say, to hold up arms and continue fighting. And they've been fighting for
Mm,
14 years. Unfortunately speaking, after Assad fled the country, many Syrian people felt completely subjugated,
mm,
and their moral, let's say, is completely destroyed. And they are basically calling for anyone to come and help at the current moment. And we have to also put it in the proper context. Any resistance will need at some point certain support. The popular support is very important, is detrimental if the people decide to fight. But
mm,
if you don't have an industrial base, if you don't have the weapons, you're not manufacturing weapons, you will need somebody supplying you weapons. One of the uh, best armed non state actors in the world is Hezbollah. And Hezbollah, up until this moment, it relies on supply chains, whether it is spare parts or direct weapons. So
mm,
even the missiles or rockets that Hezbollah manufactures, some of the technologies and knowledge comes from or used to come from Syria, Iran, and other places. Therefore, in the coastal cities, if there is no regional or international support for the people, then we are asking them to go to meat grinder. So I'm not in favor of people fighting back now without solid support because we're sending them
yeah.
to their imminent death. And that
They
is
can't
why,
they can't physically fight back right now.
no, they cannot. That is why because who are the players
Yeah.
that can be interested in supporting them? So I will mention Hezbollah. Hezbollah is probably interested. However, they are still recovering from a bloody war with Israel, number one.
Mhm.
And secondly, the sectarian sensitivity in the region is at its
Yeah.
peak, unprecedented. So even if a Hezbollah, let's say the most junior official in Hezbollah says, "Oh, we sympathize with the people in Syria," they will interpret it in a different way, and the same goes with
Mm,
Iran. So the other player is Russia, which is uninterested in arming them. So the only formula left are two. It's either Syria going to become federalized, there is a central government, a weak one in Damascus, and the rest are managing their own affairs, or
mm,
they are headed to a complete Balkanization of Syria, which means in the coastal part, the Alawites and the Christians in the Christian Valley, they could form their own mini state. The same goes with the Druze and the Kurds. And this is what Israel wanted to achieve in Syria for a long time. For 20, 30 years,
mhm, mhm,
they've been working and planning. And I want to go one step further and say they emerged successful in Syria. They have won this regime change war. There are two players who won the Syrian war, Turkey and Israel. And both of them are
mm,
using the chaos now for different end games. And that
mhm.
is why I also speculate that there could be different clashes of interest between Turkey and Israel over the Syrian territories. And this is again another formula for endless wars in the country.
You mentioned the significant number of Syrians that are justifying the killings, and a reason that they're justifying it is saying, this is payback for what went down during Assad's time. Why do you think that this is the case? Aren't these their own people?
So the sad reality is there is no Syrian people.
Mm,
And I came to this realization. I always saw differences between Syrian people and we considered it difference because it's a mosaic, different people, but it turned out there is no Syrian people. There are different sub identities, and people nowadays see themselves or identify themselves according to these sub identities. And
mm,
for a long time, the the Americans, when they occupied Iraq, they have humiliated the Sunnis. And the same goes in different places around the world. So Erdogan, during this time, he presented himself as the savior of the Sunnis, somebody who is going to uplift the Muslim Sunnis from their misery. So he capitalized on these American wage wars in order to gain credibility and influence in the region.
Mhm.
But this also caused lots of tensions in multicultural or ethnic countries because there was always this the perception that one group can dominate on the rest. Like the culture of democratic coexistence doesn't exist in the region. Whoever comes in power, they want to subjugate the rest, which means the our Arabic countries aren't ready for this type of governance. And this is something that I have been brainstorming a lot. And I thought, like, in European countries or in Western countries, these Westphalian type of states, they are a product of hundreds of years of their own civilizational or cultural development, whether for
Mhm.
positive or for negative. But in our region, for the first time, what is Syria? What is Lebanon? What is Iraq? It's been only decided by the Sykes and Picot again 110 years ago, and they told us those are your borders. Now you have your nation states, but we will govern you for the rest 30 to 40 years. And then in 45 to 48, then they given the people this so-called independence after 450 years of occupation between the Ottoman Empire and the French and the Brits. So people have woken up the second day finding themselves in a nation state without national identity, basically. And during this time, two competing approaches rose. One is Pan Arabism, and the second one is the Muslim Brotherhood.
Mhm.
And this has ended now in 2024 in favor of the Muslim Brotherhood because the Islamic identity is very essential, let's say, in the hearts and the minds of all Muslims, and
Mhm.
rightfully so. But when you politicize that identity through regional powers such as Turkey and Qatar and you funnel money, then you use the religion in order to establish an empire, in order to establish a dominance over the region. And this is what Turkey did, and this is what Qatar did, and this is what Saudi Arabia did. And this has ended up in a big, big tragedy for the Syrian people, regardless of ethnic or religious background. Sooner or
Mhm.
later, as I mentioned also on X, Syrians will notice and will realize, albeit too late, that they didn't only take down a regime, they took down their nation because this was a fresh idea to have a nation state. We were always part of either an Ottoman Empire or part of a colonial power, but this attempt to unify the people under an umbrella of Pan Arabism has failed miserably. And this is why the countries will either, this region will either join the Qatari or Turkish or Saudi camp, or the minorities will choose other foreign powers. And that's why you see the Druze or the Kurds, they say, we don't have a problem with Israel. We're getting killed by these Takfiris. So,
Mhm.
but I know this is a wrong, let's say, understanding because Israel participated in creating these conditions against these minorities and now is presenting itself as a savior. But I'm asking for the people to understand, like, if there is a gunman outside your home, he is from Chechnya, Uzbekistan, and they are completely psychopaths. They have no feelings at all. They, like I myself, if I hold a cat in my hand, we have a heart. We want to protect this cat.
Mhm.
We have this instinct, right? These people
Mhm.
have heartless completely. They're killing women and children and men, complete innocent people, and not only for killing, out of joy. They're enjoying the killing. So this gives us the perception which what type of people we are dealing with, and that is why the other day I was in a demonstration here in front of the Turkish embassy. I was shocked. I was shocked. In the past 10, 14 years, myself, I received lots of backlash from Syrian people because they were like, why are you standing with the Syrian regime and this and that? But
Mhm.
th- that is why I was on the side of the Assad regime or the Syrian army because I knew this is what is going to happen if this regime collapses. Now they
Mm.
understand it, but again in the wrong way. They're coming and telling me, even if Israel intervenes, we don't have a problem. We want just to save our family and our friends or whoever relatives left in Syria. And this proves the
But how
point that is
why
this.
do they see this as why do they see Israel as a savior at this point, after the massacres in Gaza? And again now, like the ceasefire on Gaza is completely demolished now, we were seeing where we're going back all the way to October of last year. It's so heavy. And how do they not see this?
I'm very happy you asked this question, and I myself covered the horrendous massacres happened in Gaza.
Mhm.
And what we saw in Gaza is it was unprecedented. Like, what
Yeah.
does it mean killing 700 people in one day, right? Like,
It's a number
I
too big for people to even
yes,
comprehend or imagine.
if 700 people die in one day in the United States, they will invade any country just out of desperation, right? 700
Mhm.
people is those are 700 families, 700 souls, and this is horrendous. Um, but people forget when there is a new misery. So what happens is
Mhm.
we live in a region. You remember Sabra and Shatila. You remember every massacre which happened in the region. But a new one comes at a later stage. So your
Mm.
entire emotions now are focused on the new one, and this is
And
what
then
is
everything
happening.
else just becomes history.
Exactly. They are basically confusing the people emotionally. They're hitting them from one wall to another. And I
Yeah.
will be also. I'm very happy you asked this question because I am intending to be very honest with you.
Mhm.
This what we call the Ikhwanization of the region by
Yeah.
Qatar and by Turkey also reached to Palestine. So you have also people living in Gaza, basically, with big platforms and celebrating the massacres against the Alawites in the coastal cities. And therefore, the people are completely losing their minds, saying,
Mhm.
we who stood with Palestine, the Palestinian people, and we paid the price for it because why do you think they came
Yeah.
after the regime in Syria? Because
Yeah.
it was a dictatorial. I mean, all the countries in the region are dictatorial, but why Syria? Because Syria has given tangible support to the groups, the Palestinian and the Lebanese groups, to resist. So that is why they came after them, right? However, when you see, I'm talking about now very influential people in Gaza. Some of them work with Al Jazeera, for example,
Mhm.
and they support Al Nusra, they support Abu Muhammad al Jolani. People will lose sympathy against them, for them, sorry,
Mhm.
for the Palestinians, right? And this
Yeah.
is something that is we have to address as quick as possible because Israel is now establishing itself as a dominant power in the region. And with what happened in Syria, they consider it a strategic victory. And
Mm.
the coming back to the bombing of Gaza has one reason. So Gaza and Yemen and Syria are interconnected with each other. Now, Syria is the most vulnerable state in the region. Trump is no longer pretending like his predecessors. He's just simply saying what the United States wanted to do for decades, and that is ethnic
Yeah.
cleansing of the Palestinians. They're just talking about it publicly every day, but where are they going to send them? Egypt, it's not going to work. And Jordan is not going to work. Jordan has the biggest borders with Israel. Imagine sending hundreds of thousands of angry Palestinians there and then probably threatening Israel from there, right? So it won't
Mm.
work with in Jordan. But Syria, where you have a self-appointed president who is begging for legitimacy from the US, he
Mm.
could agree to receive these hundreds of thousands of Palestinians, but not to settle them anywhere in Damascus or in Daraa or in Sweda. No. If he receives them, he will send them to Raqqa, he will send them to Deir ez-Zor, anywhere far away from the Israeli borders. So in this case, I see that the continuation of the bombardment of Gaza is to tell the Palestinian people, you have lived 14 months of the the most inhumane conditions you could ever imagine. And this is coming back if you don't surrender and leave. And I'm reading for people in Gaza on X, like, we are not ready for another year of this same. Like, we just had our ceasefire. We don't want this again. So what they're doing is they're creating a psychological condition in Gaza to
Yeah.
force the people to say, "Khalas, we no longer want this. Take us wherever it is possible. We cannot handle this any longer."
Yeah.
How do you explain cutting the food, cutting the water, cutting the electricity? This is the reason why they are doing it. And at the same time, the Americans are talking to Jolani's government, telling him Somalia, Sudan are also on the table, but also Syria. And I would not rule out that Abu Muhammad Jolani would accept such a deal in exchange for political legitimacy long term, let's say, from the US.
Hmm. You mentioned earlier that there was a whole campaign to push you out of the country. Right now, a lot of people are being pushed out of in different countries. Like Australia is not accepting, public speakers coming into their countries. There's a big crackdown even on the Muslim communities in America. They're pushing people out. They're taking away their green cards. Any immigrants that are here right away, they're finding any kind of small thing. So, from that, you mentioned that anyone can be, in that position where we are living in our countries. I'm from Lebanon. You're from Syria. We could be back in our countries, and we could be enduring all of what's happening. As long as we're in the US or, anywhere that is a Western, country, what can we do from here?
Hmm.
As much as we care and as much as we want to rally and as much as we want to protest, what can we really do?
Actually, I came to the realization that there are deep states in these countries that are
Mhm,
too strong and they're not committed to any law or rule of law or
mhm,
constitution or court or it's about political decision. So let me give you an example. If someone is coming from Lebanon and he participated in the funeral of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, he will get deported, even in Germany, right? But
yeah.
if you make videos on TikTok and say قاتلوهم قاتلوا العلوية والنصارى والنصيرية, I don't know, like it's like kill the Alawites and kill the Shias and kill the Christians because this is what Ibn Taymiyyah said 800 years ago,
Mhm.
and he's opening some books and quoting them. Nothing happens. I'm talking about Germany. Nothing happens. Like the flag of the so-called Syrian revolution is everywhere in the German streets. And under this flag, hundreds of decapitations happened, hundreds of car bombs happened, hundreds of suicide belts,
I mean,
and
that
this. And
person who says this would be the poster child for,
Mhm,
the
mhm,
person who is that visible, let's say, minority who's standing up for or
yeah,
standing for something that is
yes,
completely against their values or
yes.
morals.
I mean, Germany is a country which says in the constitution that everybody is equal and everybody should be protected, right?
Yeah.
But
Hence
I,
the Cologne burnings.
yeah, I personally do not feel safe walking in the streets because the German government has given this type of people a type of a treatment that they feel emboldened. Like
Mm.
if Annalena Baerbock is shaking hands with Jolani, then if you're a Syrian living here and support Jolani, what do you think you is going to happen if you support Jolani? Nothing. Your government is giving Jolani 400 million euros. But if you send a penny to, let's say, a hospital belongs to Hezbollah in Lebanon, you will get deported. So this is all about political
Yeah.
decision. And since
Yeah.
the people of, let's say, who have a different opinion about their countries, such as myself, which I believed in my country and I believe that we can become independent, and all these visions that I was preaching, I'm the one who is the enemy of the state, and they have all the they have the political power, they have the military power, they have the security forces, the law, and they can interpret the law the way they want. So if a few years ago, just a quick example, Few years ago, the German government told me, "You are pro-Assad. Why do you stay in Germany? Go to Syria and let Assad protect you." Right? This is what
Yeah.
the court decided. But now we have hundreds of thousands of Syrians supporting Jolani in Germany, but they don't ask them to go back to Jolani for Jolani to protect them. So this is the double standards of the politicians. We cannot change that. We can only change the perception of the people through social media and our direct communication, whether it is you talking to someone or demonstrating in a public square or
Mhm.
writing and talking like we're doing at the current moment. But
Yeah.
at the end of the day, you have political parties in Germany or in the United States. How many parties you have in the US? You have the Democrats and you have the Republicans. And what is the difference between them when it comes to Palestine, for example? It's just like bad to worse or worse to bad.
Yeah.
It's almost the same.
Mm.
And the same here in Germany. You have all the political parties, five, six political parties, but when you look at them, none of them basically dares to have a different opinion about the major headlines,
Mhm.
which gives you the impression that there are deep states and these political parties are only representing the interests of this deep state, where deep state is about the military industrial complex, the pharmaceutical industries, the businessmen, the bankers, the rich people, the donors, and the
Mhm.
lobbies. So we are like zero on the left side in these equations, and we are speaking up. We're trying to tell the people, but the impact is very, very minimum. We have been protesting for over 10 years here in Germany about the sanctions, about restoring ties with Syria, about joint efforts against combating this type of terrorists like Jolani. But what has changed? Nothing, right? And the
Mhm.
Germans also go to the streets with tens of thousands and protest against government policy. Yes, there is a democracy. You can protest, but what changes? Nothing, basically.
So, the would you say people shouldn't go out and protest and speak up?
I think it is a noble thing to speak up. But
Mm.
if you're going to speak up, this was my problem in the past decade when I moved to Germany, is the
Mm.
passivity of the people. Like you have Syrians here, like myself, like-minded people, thousands of them, right? And when you invite them to a demonstration in front of the US Embassy or in front of the Foreign Ministry about a legitimate concern which affects directly their own parents in Syria,
Mhm.
and were it not for them sending euros to Syria, their parents would starve. So we are trying to help their parents. They don't show up. They don't show up.
Interesting.
And they say, what are you going to do? Why am I going to put my face and this and that? Okay, I understand. But now, once the killing started against their families in the coastal cities, now they come to demonstration once there is, as we say, the knife reached to the bone, you know?
Mm.
But this was our shared responsibility to speak up jointly and together with big numbers when they were just not doing it. And now they come to me and they say, "Oh my God, you were right. We thought this is not going to happen. We thought there is going to be transition." Excuse me, I'm an ethnic Armenian. Probably my ancestors were from Eastern Anatolia, not like I wasn't an Arab, but I was born in Syria and I studied the history of this country for hundreds of years in history. And I can assure
It's not your
you,
ethnicity, but it's your identity.
yeah, but I can assure you
Mhm.
the vast majority of the people do not know their history. So
Yeah.
if you don't know history, like you can read history, but if you don't learn the lessons from the history, you will repeat it. History doesn't repeat itself. The people do not learn. That's the thing.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
I remember during the university days, we had yesterday I was telling this to my wife. I said, during the university days, there was a course called civilizations,
Mm.
and they were teaching us different civilizations from India to the Islamic world, etc. And the question was from the professor, who are the first four caliphs?
Mm.
And I was the only Christian in that class, which I was like, I don't have to raise my hand because, of course, there are 30 other people who know it. None of them raised their hands, and none of them knows even what sequence were these caliphs. What does that tell you about the people?
I mean, it's interesting because that puts into perspective also why people don't understand, the Alawites and the Shiites. They haven't even gotten that far
No, the
to be able
uh,
to accept.
you are the enemy. Like if you are ignorant about something, you see that as an enemy because you're completely, let's say, unaware of what do these people believe in.
Mm,
And this is mostly, in my opinion, because people do not really interact and socialize with each other, probably in the university, but then they create their own groups, etc. You're from Lebanon, and
mhm,
I lived in Lebanon for 5 years. I lived in Kura. I went to Tripoli. I lived
mhm.
in Beirut. I was like every day in Dahiya, in the southern suburbs of Beirut. I was in the south, in the borders with Palestine. How many non-Shias go to Dahiye? Like when I used to go to Dahiye, people, my family, they are in Ashrafiyeh. They used to tell me,
Mhm.
Are you insane? Like, is there
Like,
something
why are
wrong
you
in?
going?
Is there something wrong in your mind? Are you going to Dahiye? Like, those are Hezbollah people. Like, I'm like,
Mhm,
What do you mean by that? Like I myself, I felt like the safest place for me was Dahiye. Passing
mhm.
through Dahiye every day, eating in Dahiye every day. But this is the problem that people don't know each other. Since the civil war, there is still technically West Beirut and East Beirut, and people do not really interact. And if somebody comes from different region to rent a place in your region, you don't give your home or your apartment to these people because they're
Mm,
from a different region. Therefore, the people really, I'm serious that they don't know. Aleppo people do not know what the Idlib people are about. The same goes Idlib people about Aleppo, Deir ez-Zor, etc.
So this, I think, is the hits the nail on the head right there. Is this internal dialogue that we as Muslims aren't able to have or kind of agree on or come to a standing on. And whatever sect you may be, Palestine is a human issue, right? Syria, what's going on in there? They kind of tackled or broke down the internal conflict that's already exists within the country. So there wasn't anything new that was done, but what was done is it's like the time of Trump when he just made it okay to be racist,
Yeah.
openly racist, right? And many have drawn attention to the fact that these Western governments suddenly are so generous towards Syria,
Hmm.
um, right? It's not charity; it's a transaction for them.
Yeah.
What do you believe the transaction here is, and what do the Western powers have in store for Syria in the future?
So the Western governments and these Western politicians, despite their insane statements, and sometimes I'm like, what are they talking about? Do they really know what they're talking
Mm,
about? Do they really understand what they're saying? But there are very powerful forces behind them who know very well what they're doing and why they're doing this. Anyone who believes that they didn't know who is Jolani and what Jolani is going to do, this person is naive. They deliberately propped up Jolani among all the other so called revolutionary forces and wanted him to be the president of Syria because they know that he will persecute the minorities. And this goes in the larger context of the Balkanization of Syria, which is the strategic goal of Israel.
mm,
So all these politicians nowadays sending money to Syria, they have only few interests. One of which is to guarantee that Jolani will stay in Damascus, in Homs, in Hama, in Aleppo, and this is going to be under Turkish patronage. And basically, who do you think is the real ruler of Syria? It is Hakan Fidan. Hakan Fidan, Prime Minister of Turkey, he is the guy who made Jolani, who made the group of Jolani, who made sure that Jolani and Baghdadi back then had good relationship. So Hakan Fidan is the real ruler of Syria. And Turkey is a strategic partner for the EU, and it's a NATO country. Therefore, Syria will be eventually under the influence of NATO country.
Okay.
But this will also present challenges for the minorities, Sueda, in eastern shore of the Euphrates, the Kurds, the Christians, and the Alawites. But this is perfect for them because now the Kurds and the Druze say, okay, let Israel protect us. And they already opened, they went to the Golan Heights last week, many of the Druze, and they have
Mhm.
family in the Golan Heights, right? And the same with the Christians and the Alawites in the coast now. I think the formula is going to be um, Israel and Turkey share the goal of ousting Assad. But for Turkey,
Mhm.
that was the end goal. That was something that after that we open a new chapter and we are done. But for Israel, that was only one stage before different stages in Syria.
Yeah.
So Israel doesn't want for Turkey to have influence in the south of Damascus. That is why Israel is destroying all the bases and creating demilitarized zone in the south. They will open
Mhm.
a corridor with the Sweda and with eastern shore of the Euphrates with the Kurds. But in the coastal cities, Israel doesn't have an access. So
Mhm.
who can fill the vacuum? Basically, it's going to be Russia. Russia and Israel are talking directly about this, that the Mediterranean shouldn't be dominated by Turkey because Turkey can put its hands on the gas fields in front of the Mediterranean. And the Greece and Cyprus, if you remember, they went to Damascus and met with Jolani, not out of love for him,
Mhm.
they hate him, but they warned him that he cannot give license for Turkey to extract gas from the Mediterranean. This violates many international laws. Therefore, Greece, Cyprus, Israel, and Russia, they share the goal of keeping Turkey out of Latakia Tartus Jebel Banias, which means that these powers will cooperate together in creating certain conditions for the people to ask for international protection and separation from the rest of Syria. But I would say that the conditions for the balkanization is already, it's like if it's a dish, the dish is ready because psychologically the people are already divided. Like the country is already vertically divided now, and there is no single Alawite or Christian that I have spoken to who said, "No, no, we want to stay part of Syria. We share the same identity, and let's forget about everything that happened and peace and love." No, nobody says that. Everybody says the same thing, and we cannot live with this type of
Yeah.
brutality or with these monsters among these monsters. We want to be on our by our own and establish our state. But
Mhm.
we have to be also logical because what industrial base does the coast has? None. If they have a gas, that would be okay, but then Russia will take over it. So can they build a state with agriculture? You're Lebanese, and you know that Lebanese agriculture and services sector are the economy of Lebanon, but that's not
Mhm.
enough. That's why they rely on foreign aid and banking and lots of things.
Mhm.
So you will become dependent on someone. And even if the Alawites or the Christians establish a state for themselves, if they don't have any share in the gas fields, then they will be dependent on someone, and this someone is going to be Russia. And I'm hearing in Greece that there is always this intention to play some role because there is a big Greek Orthodox also and Catholic communities in the Christian Valley, and Greece may be also one of the players interested in having a
Mhm.
role.
And does that mean that HTS is now aligned with Israel against Lebanon? HTS, Jelani's army did go in and attack Lebanon, and the media turned this story as like you know, there was Hezbollah that was involved, but that didn't really seem to be the case.
The thing with this HTS is like if they are fighting their own ghosts, or if they're fighting ghosts or their own shadows, they say it's Hezbollah. It's like they wish that day, like the provocation is so ridiculous that um, they're fighting you know better than me who they're fighting, basically the clans, the villagers, and some of them are
Mhm.
smugglers on the borders. They're not fighting Hezbollah. If
Yeah.
Hezbollah intervenes, against HTS. This is going to end up very badly for HTS, very badly. But Hezbollah has no interest in it because, and it will not intervene. Let's
Mm.
be honest, Hezbollah will not intervene because the intervention of Hezbollah will start a bloody sectarian war and civil war, not only in Syria, but also in Lebanon.
Yeah.
So Hezbollah will stay in its positions in the south. And if the HTS pose an existential threat against Lebanon, and there is a consensus among the Lebanese government, the army, and the Sunni parties giving the political cover for Hezbollah, only then Hezbollah could intervene. But this shows us something like Turkey is bombing Syria in the north. They're completely wiping out entire families among the Kurdish people, tens of them per week. Israel is bombing the south and completely decimating the Syrian infrastructure. You have American forces, but these brainless, I'm sorry for these terms, but those are brainless, unevolved brains. They're attacking Lebanon. It's like, what are you doing? And it's so obvious that they want for such clash with Hezbollah because they believe Hezbollah came to Syria and killed babies and children and raped and this and that. And I'm going to say something for your audience because at the beginning I said I have an obsession with downloading videos and archiving for a long time.
Mhm.
I have seen videos from Syria, horrendous crimes committed by Daesh, Nusra, Jaish Islam, Ahrar Sham, FSA, Syrian army, National Defense Forces of Syria. I haven't seen one video of Hezbollah killing innocent people in Syria. I haven't seen one. If somebody has, they know my X account, they can send me. But I did all sorts of research because they're saying that Hezbollah went and killed babies and children and raped our women. That's why
Mm.
they hate Hezbollah, right? But where is the evidence for it? Where is the proof?
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
is none.
So my final question for you is, what should we expect to see in Syria in the coming months? Is there a chance that Syrians themselves will demand that justice and realize that Western powers are already executing their plans for taking over their country?
There is no Syria any longer.
Mm.
Like we have to be honest with our people. When Assad was gone on the December 8th, on December
Mhm.
9th, I wrote a long post and I said, Syria as we know it is over. And we have to get over it because if we don't do that, we will live the next decades of our lives bleeding from inside and crying over the good days that we lived in Syria. And we had lots of hopes in Syria. We were self sufficient. Syria was a regional power, and Syria built a nation state. It supported the Palestinians, it supported the Lebanese. Syrians were proud people. But those days are over. And nowadays we have a new reality, and that is the leader of the Al Qaeda is the president of Syria. So, and Israel destroyed the entirety of Syria's strategic weaponry, which means even if someone sometimes in the future does a coup against Jolani, and he's a patriotic person and he wants to unite the country again, first of all, he doesn't have the weapons to do that. Secondly, he cannot become a deterrent power against Israel. Syria doesn't have even the money now to let's say, build its military. And thirdly, the people will still remember what happened during this time, and they will reject to be part of a one nation state alongside the people who supported Jolani.
Mm.
Therefore, the entire region will change. The entire region will change. Syria is a place where when the change happens, it reflects on the region. And this is what the Ottomans knew when they occupied Syria. They saw that through Syria, they can now project their dominance not only on the region, but also this will facilitate their occupation of other regions. That's
Mhm.
why they call Syria Sham Sharif. And now Syria, with its current situation, this will reflect on the region, especially on Lebanon. I mean, I don't believe that there is a Lebanon and Syria. I believe that there is a Levant. Those
Mhm.
borders are all artificial between Syria and Lebanon. So when Syria sneezes, Lebanon gets cold. So if this project of balkanization of Syria materialize, this will definitely reflect on Lebanon. It's not like a question mark. So you will see a Salafi movement started moving in the north and threatening, and you already see the people of who was his name, Al Asir, Sheikh Al Asir, who is in prison in Lebanon from Saida. They're already now doing political work calling for his release. So the country, Lebanon, doesn't have any power to stand against this type of tide, except for Hezbollah, which will, in my opinion, of course, I could be wrong, but this is my
Mhm.
humble opinion. This experience of Hezbollah after October 7, opening a new front against Israel in support for the Palestinians, and the price Hezbollah paid, it will compel Hezbollah to focus on its community and the survival of its community over strategic and regional, let's say, considerations.
Makes
Therefore,
sense.
Hezbollah will be forced to protect its community. You cannot destroy Hezbollah. Hezbollah is the people. And this is something that
Yeah.
I try to explain the Westerners or the pundits
Mhm.
because they don't know what is Hezbollah. What is Hezbollah? Hezbollah is the people of Lebanon. So if you want to destroy Hezbollah, you have to kill all the Lebanese Shias, basically, in order to reach your goal. And that's not going to happen. Therefore, in my opinion, Hezbollah will be localized. It will protect its community from this terroristic trend that is hitting the region right now.
Mhm.
In the future, if there is an opportunity arises, something changes, yes, but I don't see this is going to happen in the foreseeable future. Like people have to take a breath and take a step back. I watched Dr. Jamal Wakim, who is one of the people who taught me everything about geopolitics when I used to work in Lebanon. He says like all these 50 years of the project that the Pan-Arabists built and the groups like Hezbollah and others built in the region, now we're back again 50 years
Mhm.
in time. And I think if there is no real multipolarity where you have an international power backing you, it is going to be very, very difficult for the people to copy the same experience and challenge the Americans without having a superpower in their back. That's the thing. And who is the superpower, let's say, candidates? China and Russia. And none of them have shown any interest in supporting non-state actors or any actors in the region who seriously challenge the American dominance over the region. They still
Mhm.
prefer cooperation. Once Trump said, let's agree on Ukraine, all the talks and all the statements that came from Russia, we will never deal with the US again, and US is no goes of us, all of a sudden everything has been changed. And
Mhm.
now they're going back to diplomacy because the US is still the superpower.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Kevork, for your insight and for your perspective. I know it's very hard to say, speak about your country and say that it's gone. Um, that's something that is very heavy
It's harder
on
for
all of
my
us.
family. I'm trying to really explain this to my family, to my father and mother, and they're crying every day. I do also, deep inside. I don't show my weakness to the people who think they have won this war, but as I don't think that there is any going to be any time that I could visit Syria again, and that's the sad reality about it. Like the country is gone, and I'm in asylum forever.
It breaks you.
Yeah, it
Well,
does.
thank you so much. Thank you so
Thank you for
much.
having me.
Hopefully, we see better times in the future.
Inshallah.
Thank you. Before we conclude this episode, I wanted to give a quick shout out to our founding members of Truth on Patreon. There is Salim Abbas Barwani and Hassan Shrada. Thank you for joining me on this latest episode today. And if you like what you see here at TMJ News, please like and share this video and subscribe to our channel for more content.